Hello and welcome to this episode of the Midwest Spook-Kast. Today we are talking about hauntings around Indianapolis, Indiana, with some history and some, I'm not wholly sure about what this is because this wasn't my episode to talk about, but thank you for joining us for whatever device you are listening in on and wherever we have posted this. Thank you all for joining us. Right now, we're going to pass it over to Mariah to give us some history about the topic today.
Thanks, Alex, for that introduction. So Alex made a comment that he didn't pick this episode topic. I picked this episode topic. The reason why I kind of picked this episode topic is because, as I mentioned in our introductory episode, I am back in school online. And the school that I'm taking my program out of is based in Indiana, not Indianapolis, but Indiana. And so for the last couple of years, I've had to fly in and out of Indianapolis to get there. And I just really have thought Indianapolis was a really cool city, the little bit of time that I've spent in there. And so I kind of was doing a little bit of research and I was like, guys, let's look into this. Plus, Indiana is still technically the Midwest and we're the Midwest Spook-Kast. So I thought this would be an appropriate topic. So one area of history that I want to dive into is the Indianapolis catacombs. If you didn't know that there was some catacombs in Indianapolis, you're in for a real treat today. They're located in downtown Indianapolis where the craziness is. If you've ever been to Indianapolis, it's kind of by where the Colts Stadium, the Lucas Oil Stadium is. It's not there. It's not underneath the Lucas Oil Stadium, but it's around that area. It's on the northeast corner of Market and Delaware Streets. So you know the exact areas where you can go.
Dang, I'm going to Google Maps this right now.
Yeah, like it told me exactly where it was.
Is Johnny in there again today?
Johnny might be in the Indianapolis catacombs.
Well, it's a lot shorter trip than to Paris.
He's slowly making his way back to South Dakota. Yep. He had a layover in Indianapolis and got lost in the catacombs there again.
Somehow, for some reason, he left the airport.
This is a tangent, but the Indianapolis airport, easily the best airport I've ever been in. Not been in all the airports in the United States, but I love the Indianapolis airport.
All right, we're not sponsored by them. You don't need to shill.
You're right. But still, I just had to add that in there. So these Indianapolis catacombs first started as part of the Tomlinson building that was made in 1886. This building was named after Stephen D. Tomlinson, who was a pharmacist who donated the money for this building to be built. So for like anything, if you're shipping out a bunch of money for something, you get a building named after you. So that's exactly what happened to Stephen D. Tomlinson with the Tomlinson Hall. This money actually came after Stephen's death, though. His wife, Mary Todd Brown, donated the money to the building after Stephen died. So it still was in Stephen's name because it was his money, but his wife was the one who said, yep, that's what we're doing with his money. Why she didn't keep it for herself? Not entirely sure, but she donated it. So this queen, right? Queen, giving money to the city of Indianapolis. What a wholesome woman. So the first floor of this building was all office buildings and held overflow from the city market. If you've ever been down in downtown Indianapolis current day, you would know that that's basically like a mall area. There's tons of shops, there's tons of like stores and everything. Back in 1886 when this was built, it was more of like a farmer's market. They called it the city market, but it was more of like a farmer's market, what we would call nowadays. So any overflow from that city market was also held on that first floor with the offices. And then the second floor you could go up, and there was actually this huge auditorium. It was one of the biggest for its days. And it could fit 4,200 people in the audience alone. For the time period, 1886 time era, it was a huge auditorium. So it was used a lot by the city of Indianapolis, and it had many different public events. There's lots of different musical concerts there, like John Philip Sousa, if you don't know him. He was considered the March King in the classical music world. And so he brought his band to the Tomlinson Hall and premiered a whole bunch of his works for Indianapolis. Ignacy, John Patterson, and other big bands were performed there as well. If you don't know what big bands are, that's a type of jazz music that usually has brass in the back, and then you've got some saxophones, and then you've got some drums in there as well. So a lot of fun music events happen there. They also, in this Tomlinson Hall, started the annual May Music Festival there. And I believe from what I saw that this festival is still held every May. I wanted to go see it while I was there in May, but I did not have time, so I didn't. But this is just like a big music festival, not as big as Coachella. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
But
do you dress up fancy like Coachella to go there?
Maybe, if you want.
I don't know how people dress up for Coachella, though.
Coachella's interesting. But it was this annual music festival that they had there. Then they also, another thing that would be held in this auditorium were different dance marathons. Kayla made a face. She's just like, oh my gosh. Yeah, so much fun, right?
Is this like we're going to do, what was it called? The Gangnam Style?
This was before Gangnam Style came out.
Oh.
These dance marathons were really popular during the Great Depression, apparently, kind of as a way to get together and kind of boost spirits, because it was the Great Depression. People were not all that happy. So they got together, they danced, they had lots of fun, and did that quite a bit. Around the time of the 1930s, the Tomlinson Hall actually started to deteriorate. They hadn't done much renovations to it, and city leaders at that time really wanted to tear it down and turn it into a parking lot because it just wasn't being held up, and it was going to cost more to renovate it and fix it than it really was worth. Unfortunately, we see a lot of buildings from that time period that haven't been kept up, and they deteriorate, and people are like, we're going to turn it into a parking lot. Makes me think of that song. Oh, I just thought of it. I don't remember the song, but it's like, turn into a parking lot.
Sounds quality.
So these city leaders that wanted to turn this into a parking lot also decided that the Tomlinson Hall was the city's biggest fire hazard because it was deteriorating. So I didn't see any specifics onto why it was a fire hazard, but the city leaders did deem it the biggest fire hazard. Which is coincidental because there was a big fire that broke out in the Tomlinson Hall on January 30th of 1958. So this is about 28 years later, hadn't turned it into a parking lot yet.
Do you know what caused the fire?
I do. Supposedly a pigeon dropped a lit cigarette on the roof.
What?
This is what it says on all the research that I did.
The official documents for
The
this
official
fire,
documents stated.
The research.
cause of fire, pigeon dropped a lit cigarette.
Have you ever heard of it not happening? Can't you see it though? Like a person's just smoking and a pigeon comes around and is like, oh, there's something there, and takes it out of your hand.
The problem is I'm visualizing in my head, but it's not reality. It's a Looney Tunes cartoon.
Maybe that was what it was, actually.
Do you know how they say birds are government drones?
Oh, are you saying that this fire was an inside job?
Yeah.
The government caused this fire.
Conspiracy theory. They wanted to turn it into a parking lot. Maybe they just said it was a pigeon because they couldn't come up with a better idea.
They needed
there's a conspiracy theory against Marlboro. They were trying to make Marlboro and drop all of its stock, so all the pigeons were out stealing the cigarettes from people.
My God. Okay, so a pigeon stole a lit cigarette and dropped it on the building and caused the fire.
Yes.
What else do we know about this fire?
All right, so after this pigeon dropped the cigarette on the roof, demolition began because it just destroyed this building. There was no coming back from it. Like I said earlier, it already was beyond repair in terms of cost effectiveness. Now this fire really ruined it. So the demolition only took care of the above structure. It didn't take care of anything that they put underground because there was a basement to the Tomlinson Hall. So they didn't do anything with the basement. They just left it be. Whereas the upper part of it, that's no longer there. So you can't go see the Tomlinson Hall anymore.
Shoot.
Sorry.
God dang it, I want to go to those dance competitions.
I don't know if they hold them anymore.
Dang.
We gotta find somewhere to do dance marathons. So the basement, when the Tomlinson Hall was still standing and being used, was used to transport the goods and store any more overflow from the city market, which, like I said earlier, is like a farmer's market. So the basement was more of a storage area, and it has roughly 20,000 square feet. The basement of the Tomlinson Hall is still there, which is now considered the Indianapolis catacombs because of how large it is and just its history behind it. It has often now served as a homeless shelter, especially, where Indianapolis is in the Midwest. So the winters get brutal there, if you know, below zero temperatures, plus wind chill. They got to find somewhere out of the wind. So if you go down there, a lot of times you'll find homeless people living down there.
As we say in the Midwest, it wouldn't be so bad if it weren't for the wind.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
It wouldn't be so bad if it weren't for the wind. Or the humidity. The summer, it's the humidity.
Yeah. That's when you want the wind.
Exactly.
And the wind doesn't happen.
Yes. The wind is the winter. The humidity is the summer. So there is a door that you can enter these catacombs through, but it's kind of hidden out of public view. You've got to kind of know where it is. But when you find this door, this kind of like area, what you do is you go through the door, and then you go down a hallway, and then you go down some stairs. Like, they've got this hidden. You got to know what you're doing to get into these catacombs. You got to know where you're going. And there's roughly 140 plus columns there holding up this structure. Or what used to be the Tomlinson Hall. So you can imagine how big this Tomlinson Hall is if they needed 140 plus columns. And you can still see those columns in the underground. So that is what I've got for the history of the Indianapolis catacombs. And now Kayla has some encounters from the Indianapolis catacombs and some other surrounding Indianapolis areas.
Well, thank you, Mariah, for that outstanding introduction. Always here for that good quality introduction. So, Mariah brought up the catacombs, and that's interesting. We just did the Paris catacombs and essentially speaking, catacombs are, places where the dead are laid to rest, and in a significant number, where with these catacombs, no one's died in there that we know of.
I was going to say, I did see that they don't know if anyone's died in there.
Reported.
Right, reportedly no one has died there, but like I did say, there's homeless people who live there.
That's just it. And that's where I was kind of surprised, but I also wasn't surprised that nothing was reported, just because all the research I seen was that there wasn't a lot of historical documentation done on that kind of stuff, because the downfall is, even back then, there was a lot of stigma when it came to the homeless populations, and people didn't keep track of that kind of stuff. So again, it's very well likely someone could have, especially with it getting so cold. And in videos I watched, usually we see basements as being like cold, murky places. They did report that this, it stayed about 55 degrees in the winter time, so they kept ice down there, and in the summertime they would expect it to be cold, but it stayed really hot, which is unlike most basements. So to kind of start off, I found this really interesting tidbit from a tour guide, and in it they were talking about a torture commercial that was filmed in these catacombs, and in it this group of actors was in there. They were getting tortured, and this woman came in and trained rats to crawl across this guy. And at the end, when she's picking up all of her pet rats, she originally had 17. Well, she ended up leaving with 20 rats. Somehow 3 more rats decided to come with. They're like, you know what, sounds good. Leaving here and going home with this lady. So I have to laugh here because I was like, wow, all right.
I think that has become my new, worst way to die.
Oh, God.
You all have that one way you definitely don't want to die. You just mentioned that. I'm like, rats.
Yep. And,
tortured by rats.
Anything else is preferable at that point.
I would rather be burned alive.
But these are pet rats.
You said they're torturing the actors.
They were acting.
They were pet rats that were trained to torture.
I mean, someone likes that somewhere in this world. So this one's outside of the catacombs. So Herbert the pervert, He killed 11 young boys and men he met at gay bars.
Is that his actual nickname?
That's what they nicknamed him, Herbert the Pervert.
Oh, good.
Oh, lovely.
He is suspected to have killed many more, as 25 bodies were found at his home. They call this Fox Hollow Farms. And I went through a list of the most haunted places in the Midwest, and Fox Hollow Farms is listed as one of the top ones. It's reported there's a lot of really negative activity that occurs there, which reasonably so. They dug up 25 bodies there.
Jeez.
Outside of the 11 that he just left along the different, I can't remember the interstate that goes through there, but he had abandoned different bodies along that interstate, and then at his own home buried 25 bodies. So I think reasonably so. It's not going to be good vibes there. You're not going to go there and live, you're talking about Coachella. You're definitely not going to have Coachella there.
Sounds a lot like John Wayne Gacy.
Right. And that's where I'm always surprised, we see all these
You know who
documents.
John Wayne Gacy is?
The clown killer.
Oh, yeah.
And he had all of those boys' bodies like underneath his house.
Yeah. As soon as you said that, yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of John Wayne Gacy.
Yeah.
And that's why, thinking about that, you hear of cases like John Wayne Gacy, Ted Bundy, and all them, but you never hear about Herbert the Pervert, even though he is one of the most renowned serial killers in the Midwest because of his count. And he was never taken into custody because when a warrant was released on him, he ended up committing suicide.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you said the magic words on why it doesn't really get reported nationwide. You said Midwest.
That's valid.
If you're in the Midwest, it doesn't really get reported on the national news.
John Wayne Gacy was in Illinois.
Oh, I guess, yeah.
And I mean, Dahmer was in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, maybe.
So those were two Midwest ones.
I guess this just was... Well, when was this, though?
About the 70s to 80s.
Yeah. Probably about the same time as Dahmer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that had a lot of the attention. You also had the Night
Right.
Stalker. Then you had John Wayne Gacy. So you had all these high-profile killers that were
Right.
taken in, that went into custody that they could interview, and they could never interview this guy. So
But this individual, he was specifically killing gay men.
right.
Well, that 70s, 80s, there was still a lot of stigmas against that community. So and people that were like that. So, a lot of people might not have cared that much about it because
And those are the exact kind of people that Jeffrey Dahmer went after too, was gay men.
And that's how he got
Yeah.
away with it for so long too.
Yeah.
right. But there was a stigma then that not everyone would have necessarily cared about it.
Right.
Welcome to our murder podcast.
Yep.
Oh no, a spin-off. So kind of continuing off this is the part I thought Alex would find really intriguing. So for any of you that are CIA conspiracy theorists, or if you know about Project MK Ultra, this is the project right before Project MK Ultra. So Project Artichoke by the CIA was done in the Indianapolis area. So this project was done to understand the effects of interrogations. The CIA wanted to understand if people could be involuntarily made to attempt an act of assassination. It also aimed to understand the effects of LSD, morphine, hypnosis, forced addiction, and various other things. This is the leading project to Project MK Ultra. So why this took place in Indianapolis was many of the CIA members would go around Indianapolis trying to buy all the LSD, because I guess this is a hot spot for LSD. They were using it on various people to try and test to see, would they be more like, because with MK Ultra, you're looking at, can you coerce a person to admit to something more easily, which of course they found people were admitting to things that they didn't even do. So the CIA is just a interesting place to be, I bet. So I figured that'd be interesting for Alex, because he's a historical nut. Do you have any insight, Alex, to share?
Oh yeah, my insight on because I have my inside guy in the CIA.
If only this was like a video podcast kind of thing. Alex had the best facial reaction to that. He took his glasses off and had his head down.
The moment she started talking about, I was, oh no, where are you going with this one? The moment you said MK Ultra, I was like, oh no, this is not gonna end well.
So you're well versed with MK Ultra.
I'm familiar with it. I wouldn't say I'm, ready information on it at the top of my head, but I do know of it. And I do know parts of it. And yeah, that's pretty much what it was. Is a lot of LSD, a lot of trying to convince people to do things or they convince them to think that they actually did something. And yeah, that was a wild time. Yeah.
That whole time span was an interesting time. People always talk about, it was great growing up. Then I'm like, well, yeah, because you all sounded like you were high on LSD.
Yeah.
So
willingly or forced upon you.
Exactly. It was an interesting, living in the hippie time would have been a very great time. Oh, man. So kind of moving past the CIA and their fun. So we talked about earlier how, again, catacombs are essentially places where people are buried. We talked about it with the review of the Paris catacombs, that they were made out of limestone. And with these catacombs, they're also made out of limestone. So that's where I found it interesting that the research that I did, I spent quite a bit of time trying to find anything ghost-related, supernatural related, and I'll kind of go over those quickly here in a moment. But there is a hypothesis or a belief by the paranormal community that limestone is linked to it can either collect or release electromagnetic energy, which a lot of times you deal with like spirit boxes and all that kind of stuff, or can also be involved with psychic energy. So they believe limestone is a huge catalyst for all of that. So it's interesting, again, I'm kind of curious. They talk about in one of the videos I watched that there's a lot of people wanting to, with it being a city market on top and of course that empty basement in the bottom, they want to convert that so that they can use it and make money off of it. But it is a multi-million-dollar project. And for those that are similar to myself and love watching anything paranormal related, anytime you see a historical place being renovated, you see an increase of paranormal activity. So I'm curious to see if they ever decided to renovate the building, if paranormal activity would increase. So just kind of a side note there with that.
Did you find anything? Because they've built that mall, that city market area on top of where that was. Did you find anything paranormal when they were building that?
There wasn't anything that I seen. The downfall is with a lot of it, any type of stories that people were talking about, it was kind of your basic stuff, the orbs, bumps in the night, random shadows. It wasn't like they had a specific ghost, where a lot of times with renovations you'll see more people will report more full body apparitions and whatnot. So that's where I was kind of like, oh, this is again surprising that there wasn't more. But again, would there be more with the basement, with that being involved? So kind of continuing on some of that ghostly spooky stuff there. So kind of looking at what I found, again, there wasn't these dramatic stories of people being flung around or exorcisms or anything fun like that. But again, objects often are reported of being moved around, myths that form apparitions and more. Again, you go, why is it haunted if there's no reported dead bodies? Again, we don't know. So there is a director of the city market that was interviewed, Mr. Stevie I'm not going to pronounce his last name. I don't want to butcher it and him come after me. But he stated there is a haunted chair in one of the rooms leading out the catacombs. I don't think it has moved for years. So there was a paranormal investigation crew that went down there, and the guy was sitting on the chair while talking to a spirit box. And the footage wasn't creepy by any means. It was just your run-of-the-mill, everyday, them talking to someone. But they say if you move the chair, it'll move back or whatnot. But that's one of the stories that I could find on it. So the one thing that I found that was really interesting, I thought Alex and Mariah both, I think, will really appreciate this. So
is it John Philip Sousa?
No.
Dang it.
But Mariah talked about earlier how a lot of the homeless populations lived there. So if you think about back in 1912 and 1913, this of course was after, slavery was abolished, but we still were dealing with the Jim Crow laws. We were still dealing with segregation. So this was one of the first times that whites and blacks were integrated together. They were not separated in the catacombs. So it's really amazing to think, this is one of the first real experiences where they aren't forcibly segregated. So I thought that was a great thing for that time. Again, it's sad that it's homeless people because people deserve better than being homeless. But again, it was a really interesting tidbit. Another story that I found, this is from this person's words, quote unquote. So we keep the lights off usually, and every time I go down there and turn the lights on, I greet the spirits like, "Hey guys, it's just me." I'm like, yeah, you know what? They're spirits, they're people. They want human conversation. But kind of going off of that, the guy didn't report anything significant. He always said, there was always experiences, but nothing remarkable. So again, it was really difficult to find anything significant on this area. I think when we kind of come down to it, a lot of this was more the historical aspects. It's a really great place to check out if you're in Indianapolis. And of course, too, I don't think any of us would want to be in that basement alone in the dark. At least I wouldn't want to be. Maybe Johnny if he's door dashing right now, I guess.
If you go to Indianapolis and you have experiences in the catacombs, please email us or hit us up some way.
Right.
We want to hear it.
The last thing I got on that is, in my segment anyways, I got a little bit from Johnny. One of the tour guides reported that he took a photo down there and they ended up seeing a white apparition in the photo. But then also he reported that in the basement there used to be a horse-drawn carriage that they stored down there, and it would move around periodically. So the person that kept up the basement knew where it was, and if they'd go in the basement, it would be moved. And this wouldn't be remarkable if other people had access, and at that time it was really only this one person. And unlike the Paris catacombs, there's no way to sneak down there that I know of or that I've seen. I've seen some ghost investigators that kept trying to find ways to sneak in and they couldn't. So it's a little interesting that this horse-drawn carriage is moving around by itself. All right, so moving on to some of Johnny's research. We will begin with Pogue's Run. This is outside of the catacombs, so kind of picture yourself somewhere else. So George Pogue settled into Marion County in 1819, building a cabin for his family of 7. Later realized the cabin sat very near where the 1914 rechanneling forced the river underground due to modern construction advancements. When Pogue had arrived, and for a significant amount of time afterward, the river was incredibly wild and often flooded as opposed to the near ditch it is in recent times. So kind of fast-forwarding just 2 years, to 1821, Pogue was visited by who was assumed to be a Delaware or Wyandotte native at his home. Many rumors surround this man, however. He was notably known elsewhere as a horse thief, an incredible offense at that time.
Don't steal the horses!
Oh no. Pogue may have been somewhat aware of this, as he initially only offered the man food and asked him to be on his way. However, some of his horses had indeed gone missing lately. This visitor is rumored to have hinted at the site of a Delaware camp on Buck Creek, miles away they may be at. So I'm curious, how do you not see a person running away with your horses?
If there's lots of trees around and stuff.
It might be less that you don't see them and more of how are you going to catch them when they're on your horse.
That's valid. That's valid.
Or maybe it's happening in the night, you're sound asleep, and that's
and
when
they
they're...
just kind of walk over and just take your horse.
Dang.
Anyways.
Alright, to finish up my last little bit, while at first it may have seemed as a friendly offer of knowledge, soon after Pogue had disappeared and would not be found.
This is in the moment reactions to what Johnny has written for us.
Yeah, we do not know what is on here. This is all first time we're seeing this.
Ouch. Speculation ponders if the visitor was indeed of a local tribe or simply a different settler luring him out to kill him. Whichever occurred, Pogue's body was more than likely sent down the river that would be named after him. Sad.
Bye-bye, Pogue.
Sad. I will now turn it over to my good friend since the womb, Mariah.
All right. First of all, it hasn't been since the womb, since we were 3 years old.
Okay, close enough.
Our moms didn't know each other.
That's valid.
They might have known of each other, but... So continue with Johnny's research on Pogue's Run. The first large occurrence at the creek was the dubbed Battle of Pogue's Run. This was not a traditional battle in the common sense of the word. However, due to the, at the time, current protesting to the Lincoln administration, a large amount of fuss was erupting around the Indiana State House, and many Union soldiers were beginning to confiscate weapons from only their opposing Democratic Party at the legislature. So we're getting political here in Indiana, apparently. Therefore, spurring on many leaving on trains to leave the city before this could be done. One such train was raided for weapons, and somehow between 500 to 2,000 pistols, rifles, and knives were thrown out the train windows into the creek below. I hope no one was bathing in that creek or something. Like,
Yeah.
here comes a bunch of sharp knives coming at you.
Yeah, muskets or rifles, they're not light.
No.
Especially from that time. It's like, no, they're pretty solid.
So, like, being able to lift them and just throw them out the window, like, nope, you don't get these anymore.
Ouch.
Rough. This being the latest event, some believe this angered the spirit of George Pogue, however we're pronouncing that, a man who aligned firmly in his time against the actions being taken. Speculation leads one to stories of a spectator, bloated and white in appearance, rising from the ground and the creek. Was this George? Who knows? The first concrete notation appeared in the 1889 Indianapolis News with the man named John Miller stating, "We both seen something white. It looked like a man, but it was too big. It came across the bridge and right up to the corner of my lot. Then it just appeared to melt in the air." This unnamed individual continues, "I got a better look at it another time. I was crossing the bridge just about 9:30. Then I seen the thing come toward me. It seemed to rise right out of the ground and to get bigger and bigger when it came closer. There was a fellow with me, and he hollowed at me, and the thing disappeared. It looked like it was a shape like a man, fat as is high." So I wonder if that was George's spirit upset about all the rifles and the pistols and the knives being thrown out.
Maybe.
Yeah.
He's like,
He's seeing all that money float away in front of him.
that's just it. He's like, those things are not cheap, my friend.
Nope, they're not.
Other reports similarly denote that disproportionate specter around the river, especially after it had begun to dry and became a swamp-like ditch with nowhere near as much water. Some believe the ghost lost its anger over time. Some believe it simply waits for the river to return to aid its activities. Another curious comment was made by several who had apparently seen the event themselves. Quote, "It seems to be getting into a bunch, and it is about as fat as it is high." So several reports have now said that this thing is really tall, it's really fat. It just makes me think of an ogre. You know?
Oh, Shrek.
Yeah, like a tall ogre.
Get out of my swamp.
You're right? Like, that's what it's making me think of. George just wants them to leave. He disappeared protecting his horses, and he wants them to leave. He doesn't want his horses.
Get out of my crick.
Yes. This type of behavior is often attributed such as orbs. In this case, it continues to state that a couple of young men saw the phenomenon themselves and liken it to such an object as it did not appear human to them. It did not walk, and it became very close to the two, who, upon becoming spooked, struck it with a large hickory stick. It also seemed to melt in the air.
Dang, hickory is effective against the paranormal.
Apparently. I guess that's not what my first thought is when I see, if I were to see an apparition, I'm not going to grab a hickory stick and be like, poke!
Ooh, what does it do if I poke?
Right, like poke. Oh, man. Another offered speculation on the matter seems to believe that the disuse and petrifying of the creek offends whatever is in the area, and perhaps it is simply attempting to ask for help. Ooh, maybe it's a friendly one. Regardless of this, many common experiences have included phantasm experiences, temperature drops, unnaturally smooth or rigid movements of the entity, odorous fumes, and being followed by the entity. So, if you have any run-ins with Pogue's Run, let us know what your interactions are like, and if you've seen this entity and poked it with a hickory stick.
That or a 3-year rifle at it, I guess.
So this next section is called the Slippery Noodle Bar.
What a name.
It's a fascinating name here. So let's learn about the Slippery Noodle Bar. See how many times I have to say that one. So originally, the bar was built around 1850 by German immigrants in an attempt to create an upscale roadhouse and bar for railroad passengers after the railroad came to town. This place was called the Turmount House at the time, starting with simply a music venue stage at the back of a brick building. The brick area itself was to be a stable for the guests to be in. So during the time, just before the Civil War, the main expanded building became a way station for a different type of railroad, notably the Underground Railroad. This, however, eventually sprang forward a renaming of the place to the Concordia House in honor of the first Lutheran immigrant ship. 30 years later, in 1890, the tin ceiling was introduced and then debuted the Germania House. This became a German club. However, during World War I, the name changed again by the then owner Louis Beck to Beck's Saloon to avoid scrutiny by the authorities as well as anti-German protesters.
This place has had a lot of names.
It's gone through a lot of phases there. I understand them changing the name there during World War I because there were a lot of unkind things being said about people that just happened to be from a certain country, nationality, and all that, which isn't uncommon even today still. But so it's interesting though how they, the reasons why they change things like that.
And the fact that it's now set on Slippery Noodle.
Yeah, we're not there yet, so let's find out how we get there. Because it looks like we're getting another name change already. So Walter Moore purchased the property and calling it Moore's Beer Tavern, which made its own beer in the basement, actually.
So does a Slippery Noodle make its own noodles then?
Yep. And of course, because it has to now, during the Prohibition times, it was changed to Moore's Restaurant. Because they can't have beer in the title during that, I'm sure. It was often called a speakeasy. He was determined to sell his own beer no matter what, in his words, the political morons decree.
Indianapolis just gets political, don't they?
They really, they've been just non-stop from founding to... Jeez, okay. This was covered up by an intricate piping from the basement to the bar, and a slaughterhouse business taking place in the basement as well. Though it's not known if this was done when the restaurant was closed or not. So they were disguising it with a slaughterhouse, I guess.
Can't smell the beer if all you smell is guts.
Maybe they were using the beer to cover the smell of the guts.
Yeah. We're still not at the Slippery Noodle Bar yet, so I have to keep going down this rabbit hole. So the establishment was also used as a favorite hangout for the Brady and Dingler gangs, being allowed to use the brick building stable as an area for target practice.
Yeah, target practice!
The bullet holes still exist on the east wall of the building, used as a concert venue nowadays. It's believed accidents did occur. Accidents. And this may explain a portion of the events witnessed on the premise, as well as the activity from the Underground Railroad and unseen crime hidden under the larger issues of Prohibition.
I want to go to a concert at this place just to see the bullet holes.
Yeah, see the bullet holes there on the east wall specifically.
Love it.
So following Prohibition, the owner changed the establishment's name back to Moore's Beer Tavern, at the same time as establishing another illegal business in his facility located on the second floor, Old Inn Rooms. It was a small prostitution ring.
What is this place?
So, completely against the initial creator's visions, it mattered not, as the bordello was open until about 1953, when two men fought to the death over a working girl.
Oh my gosh!
With the murder weapon itself being laid down on the bar afterwards.
Oh, that poor woman.
Oh, wow.
There's many things I expected, but I did not expect the prostitution.
Indianapolis, what's going on?
They're crazy.
Mariah, where do you go to school?
I go to school in Terre Haute, an hour away.
Oh, man.
So this reputation was boosted into a nicer light as the Yeager, Yeagy family, I don't know how to say that one, bought the business in 1963, turning it into a family business with a simple lunch counter.
Not as much prostitution.
Yep. So after discussions, the name was decided as, finally, the Slippery Noodle Inn.
Oh, good. We're stuck there now.
Okay, but it says inn, though, so maybe we're not done yet.
Oh.
Because it ends on bar, I'm pretty sure, is what it said at the beginning. And it caught on instantly. However, all second-floor rooms were turned into storage and offices at the time. So, they turned the prostitution into, a legitimate business.
Good. Good. No more prostitution.
That we know of.
Well, there's more to this, so you never know. It might come back. This update was repeated in 1985 when Hal and Carol Yeagy, again, I'm not sure how to say that name, took over the business and is now a vibrant place for meals, drinks, and blues music. Now, moving back to the spookier side, it is often believed that escaping slaves would commonly die in transit from one safe house to another, and due to their roaming nature at the time of death, would begin to haunt the last safe house they made home before their passing. This has led to, under speculation, to some of the more somber and fear-inducing events. On the other hand, it's thought that some of those who worked the bar and made their livelihood to keep their duty done have indeed continued to do so after passing. One such encounter is a male entity wearing overalls who is thought to be a caretaker still on the job. He is usually seen in the basement in his outfit, often being heard by patrons and employees. So there's your first paranormal encounter with this location, it seems.
Not very slippery yet, though.
No, we're not, I guess not yet.
He's just an innocent worker.
Yeah, that's what it seems like.
At least he's not a prostitute, I guess.
He's still doing his job, I guess. The formerly dirt basement has been home to many other experiences as well, some not as wholesome as the caretaker. Oh boy, here we go.
Okay. Unwholesome.
Yep. People have described hearing whispers in their ears coming from below the filled floor. As if there were still people down there, hoping to be free. On the second floor, many have felt sharp temperature drops becoming freezing in an instant, as well as the sensation of being touched when alone in a room. It doesn't stop at noises either. A great few have seen a male cowboy who roams the second floor, sometimes moaning in pain.
Are we sure it's pain? The second floor was where the prostitute
Well, it is often believed this may be the spirit of the man killed in the knife fight all those years ago.
So again, are we sure it's pain?
I'm imagining so.
Or is it pleasure?
Pleasure.
Well, they were there for the woman, so probably not them getting stabbed. As the weapon that ended him may have been left on the site after all. More claims have been sights of a manifesting hand springing forth from the basement floor, unmoving except to slowly wave back and forth as if looking for purchase to grab onto. While on the second floor once again, there have been multiple occurrences of seeing a lady in white meets the of course. Yep,
Every place has a lady in white.
There is that's gonna be like a sticker or a T-shirt we're gonna make. There's always a lady in white.
Yes.
Merchandise. There's a merchandise.
I think we said it in the last episode too. Like Kayla was like, "There's a lady in white."
Yep, there's a lady in white again. So yeah, the lady in white who meets the physical description of the head of the brothel at its inception. Some believe its spirit is peaceful, which has opened the minds of some to attempt to communicate with the spirit through mediums who, after say, she described herself as Madam of the Brothel.
Madam of the Brothel. What a title.
Well, that's all we have from Johnny with the research that he has found for us to talk about. So now we're going to hand it over to Kayla, and she's going to talk to you guys about our next episode we have coming up.
Thanks, Alex, for that fantastical introduction. Originally, I was planning on doing the Villisca Axe Murder House, kind of reflecting on what I want to do for the next episode. I decided to share a poll on Facebook, and your choices are for us to either research the Villisca Axe Murder House, Bobby Mackey's, or we could also talk about, I have a missing aunt, Pamela Dunn from Watertown, South Dakota. A couple of my family members have expressed some interest in coming in and meeting with us and talking about it. So with already sharing it, I just checked a little bit ago. So far, Bobby Mackey's and the Villisca Axe Murder House are tied at Zippo. And my aunt has 9 votes. So most likely the next episode will be over my missing aunt. But make sure to turn in to vote. And then we will be checking in periodically on the socials when the next episode will release. And on that note, I'm going to pass it over to Mariah for the socials.
So if you'd like to take part in that poll, you can find our Facebook as Midwest Spook-Kast is what our Facebook page is called. So we'd love to get as many votes in as possible because we also want to hear from you on what you're interested in hearing about. Although I do think the episode on Pamela Dunn will be really interesting because we'll have firsthand experience on it personally from Kayla and her family members. As for the rest of our socials, you can find us on most social media platforms. TikTok, we are at Midwest Spook-Kast. We have been teasing some little teasers for each episode as they're coming up on their release date. So if you want to be in the know on what is going to come up soon, follow us on TikTok to see our little teasers. We are also on X, formerly known as Twitter. Did you guys know Twitter changed its name?
So dumb.
It is now X. We are on X as just Spook-Kast. I tried to change it to Midwest Spook-Kast when it changed to X, and X still says that Midwest Spook-Kast is too long of a handle.
Oh.
So we are just Spook-Kast on X. And then we also have an email address. I just checked. We don't have any personal ghosty stories to share with you today. But if you would like to share a ghosty or spooky story you have for us and would like us to say it on the podcast, go ahead and email us, midwestspookcast@gmail.com. I also just shared it on the Facebook page. So if you're like, how do I spell that? It's on the Facebook page. Otherwise, I think all of our other socials are also linked to it for an email. So feel free to send us your stories. We'd love to share them on our podcast. You can stay anonymous. We don't have to share your name. So yeah, feel free to contact us, or you can send us a message on any of our social media platforms. Also, before we go, we'd like to say thank you to everyone who listened to our previous podcast episode. That last episode is currently at 100 plus views, and we feel like for our first full-length episode, that is so awesome. So thank you to all of those people who listened to our first full-length episode, and to those of you now who are listening to our current second full-length episode. We hope you continue to come back, and we really appreciate your support. We hope to grow as a podcast, and we're thinking we're going to get some new artwork here pretty soon. We're hoping to maybe do some like shirts and things, so get some merch going. So we appreciate your support so much, and we look forward to keep giving you these podcasts. All right, well, we will see you next time for our next episode on whatever Kayla's topic is. Stay spooky, ghoul friends.